Apologies in advance if this seems a little out of order. This was put together alongside studying for final exams, so just a heads up. So last video, E621 founder Arcturus was on Twitter defending an artist for an inappropriate conversation he was having with a client. A conversation that appeared to be laced with images of minors in swimsuits, as well as not safe for work gifs of young looking women. I thought it fitting to have a look into the artist in question, as they do seem to have a pretty odd track record. Now, for those of you who didn't watch last video, the artist I'm referring to, Adam Wan, goes by the user handle Zaush. He's a furry in his 30s that, you guessed it, draws furry art. He was probably one of the most popular figures, or pop-you-furs, in the fandom back then. He's been in the fandom for about 15 years, if not more by now. He spent this time tackling the usual furry art hotspots, along with Cub, incest, and husbands making phone calls just to be greeted by their wife's boyfriend mid-romp. The last one is also a bit sketchy, since the guy seems to have an affinity for drawing cuck material when he was actually cucked himself. This was with a furry artist he was dating at the time named Kyovi. They were together for quite some time until he got cucked and lost her to another furry named Cinnamon. Now, before I get off track thinking about that for too long, let's get started by going all the way back to an earlier controversy that started around the end of 2013. This was started up when Fur Affinity owner Dragoneer announced that his team of volunteer programmers would be working on their 4th attempt to rewrite the site. This attempt was dubbed Project Phoenix. Now, the leader of this team turned out to be Zaush. This decision was made regardless of the private messages leaked during the 2010 Yiffy Leak deal, where we'd see one of Zaush's ex-love interests, Ferality, coming to Dragoneer and claiming that Zaush had emotionally manipulated and intimidated her into having sex with him. Dragoneer's response was simply telling her to keep quiet about it until she could muster up substantial enough evidence to counter the backlash with, which I can somewhat get behind. What I can't get behind, however, is how he didn't consider how horrid it would be for the site's reputation, which he honestly should have. Many of the site's users were upset over Dragoneer allowing an accused sexual offender to become a staff member. I mean, what was this, a Discord server? And as you'd expect, there were many willing to come to his defense because hey, gotta have more furry children to huff at 3 AM in the morning. Dragoneer seemed to be pretty neutral on whether or not Zaush sexually violated someone or not. At least that's what he said before saying that Zaush couldn't have sexually violated Ferality because she willingly drove to his house. The website making didn't fare much better. It turns out that 2 months earlier, a user named Meyer approached Dragoneer and asked if he could work on rewriting Fur Affinity's code. He approved it, Meyer assembled his team and got to work, but because he failed to communicate, Dragoneer forgot that he gave someone permission to redo his entire site. So Meyer's team agreed to combine their efforts with the Project Phoenix group. This led to Meyer and Ben abandoning the group within 24 hours of meeting Zaush. The combination also made it apparent that Zaush had been lying about his qualifications. It just became more and more obvious that Dragoneer had hired an underqualified person who was chasing off competent volunteers. When the failure of this project finally came, he would go on to try and pin the blame on Meyer and Ben. The worst part is that the only positive of this project was the creation of a few front page mock-ups and nothing else. Another thing you can probably get from this is that Zaush isn't exactly the best with women. Although you probably got that from the cuckold mentioned earlier. Oh, speaking of fun fact, Zaush actually drew art to commemorate the cuckoldry. I wasn't sure where to fit it in this video. It seems a bit too heavy for the intro, but like, it just feels horribly cursed, you know? Anyways, let's get away from that and get over to his other stuff. His art. The controversies surrounding his art. No, not that. Stop it. We've already covered how Zaush has a habit of drawing disloyal relationships, although there's more controversy to be had than just his artwork of adultery. There's also Zaush using the Zootopia hashtag on Twitter months before the movie release to share his not safe for work Zootopia art. There was also his comic involving cuckolding, some incest, as well as a dog girl looking suspiciously underage. As much as he'd probably shrug it off, he doesn't seem to have much of a problem making Cub content. As shown by last video, Zaush has a pretty huge slice of Cub content made. It's pretty obvious he has no issue drawing it. Apart from that, he just seems to have a habit of riling people up for drama's sake. Here, he made a joke using a panel from the same grody comic mentioned earlier. Sure, most people would know that this is clearly a reference to an old Vine.
I do not associate with
But when people would later call him out for making a racist joke, maybe because of the black cat in the photo, he just played dumb on the matter. And of course, there was his bigger Cub Scandal that was mentioned in our Articus video. To make a long story short, Zaush was caught in a Telegram conversation where he and a client were talking about the age of a character for what was assumed to be a commission. In this conversation, there were images of minors in swimsuits, as well as images and GIFs that looked suspiciously like CP. The thing that I didn't mention in that video, however, was Zaush's response to the whole thing. In it, he says that he didn't possess or share CP, and that the conversation was discussing a commission, mainly the body type for the character. The body type being a 12-year-old child in a swimming suit if we're to go off by the conversation. The thing is, he also admitted to the conversation being completely real, and that the suspicious GIFs were of adult actor Sammy Daniels. I don't know why someone would know an adult actor who looks eerily young by name, but let's keep it going. Last up, he says how he's not proud of how far the line was blurred during that conversation, and that he regrets having said conversation. It is appreciated that he didn't lie and came out about it, but there's just one problem. He says he regrets the conversation, however, he says he isn't a fan of how far the line was blurred. The only line that could have blurred there was the line between Cub and real CP. Sure, there isn't a problem with the division of the two, but you can't say there isn't much of a difference between CP and Cub. Do I need to bring back the CP with the fursuit analogy? Please don't make me. October 2018. Here we have an almost 2-hour live stream detailing the chat between scaly YouTuber Cothrix, infamous zoophile Carol the Wolf, and Zaush. During the stream, you have Cothrix trying to get to the bottom of the whole Carol situation. The stream would go on YouTube before getting taken down for breaking nudity and sex terms of service. But the crowning moment of the stream will be a text conversation between the three of them. Here you have Kiro admitting to having an interest in feral art, but never committing zoophilic acts with any animals. He was called out on this pretty quick by the two, but then you go down and things start getting a bit more boggling in the conversation. Zaush goes on about how if Kiro admits to being interested in zoophilia, no one is going to care besides SJWs. He then seems to brag about the fact that he essentially came out as a pedophile, saying that his conscience is clear because he didn't lie about what happened in those chats. Chats where he tried to talk the commissioner into sexual art of a 12-year-old instead of the 10-year-old they were originally going for. And as for Cothrix, he shares the Fausty philosophy, saying that 20% of the furry community are zoophiles and that Kiro should be fine, because people outside the furry community already think we're all zoophiles anyway. But hey, the dude's drawing what can only be described as a fuckload of cub porn, so I guess he's a valuable part to the fandom or something, I don't know. Anyway, that's Zaush for you. Artist of incest, cub, cuckery, and supporter of zoophiles till the cows come home. I checked his Twitter while putting this together and he doesn't seem to have changed a bit. His most recent works being an otter getting cucked, an incest cub comic, and more Zootopia. Because you can't be a furry artist without some Zootopia in your portfolio. If you're interested in more tidbits of furry history like this, consider subscribing or dropping a like, and I will see you next video.